I've been watching a sleeping god for 6 years, and the most exciting thing that's ever happened is a decimal point shift in the temporal distortion field. That was 3 years ago. Turned out to be a calibration error. My name is Owen Miles. I'm a containment analyst at Facility Eidolon, which is the official designation for what everyone on Mars calls the God Prison. We're 2.5 kilometers beneath the South Pole, carved into rock that was fused solid by an asteroid impact sometime before Earth had multicellular life. There are 17 cells here. The IDs come from a colony-wide registry, so our 17 aren't numbered 117. Mine happens to be 19, and my station shows 17 through 21 because that's our assigned block. Each one holds a thing reality itself refuses to account for. My job is to monitor cell 19 and its occupant, an entity we call Sci-Fi, and make sure it stays asleep. Sci-Fi has been dormant for 400,000 years. We verified that through quantum carbon echo dating, which measures how long matter has been in a state of temporal suspension. When I say asleep, I mean it exists in a quantum stasis bubble, a localized distortion where time moves at roughly 1 second per 98 days. Inside that bubble, Sci-Fi ages forward so slowly that a human lifetime would pass out here before it experienced an hour. My job is to make sure nothing changes. Today is day 2190 of exactly that, nothing changing. The control room is a semicircular space with 8 monitoring stations arranged in an arc. Each station faces a wall of displays showing real-time data from 5 cells. I'm responsible for 19, but I can see the readouts from the surrounding cells too, 17 through 21. There are 8 of us on shift. The other 7 are people I've worked with for years. I know how Paul takes his coffee. I know that Lynn hums when she's concentrating, always the same 5-note pattern. I know that Nina draws geometric patterns on her notepads during the quiet hours, which is most hours. We don't talk much. There isn't much to say when your entire job is watching numbers that never change. The entities we keep here aren't aliens. That's the first thing they tell you during orientation. Aliens would be explainable. Carbon-based life from a different evolutionary path, operating under the same fundamental physics. These things are post-reality entities. They existed before or outside conventional spacetime, and they only entered our universe during the coalescence event of 2247, when dimensional boundaries weakened across the solar system for reasons nobody fully understands. We captured 17 of them. The rest either dissipated or are still out there somewhere, which is a thought I try not to entertain. My monitor shows me everything about Cell 19 in real time. The temporal distortion field strength sits at 99.3% efficiency. The quantum containment bubble measures 3 meters in diameter. The power draw from the facility's fusion reactor remains constant at 4.7 megawatts. The internal chronometer shows that 22.4 seconds have passed inside the cell since we sealed it 6 years ago. I'm on my 3rd cup of coffee when the alarms start. Every screen in the control room turns red simultaneously. The shift is so sudden and total that for a moment I think my vision is malfunctioning. Then the sound hits, a rapid pulsing tone that means critical containment failure. I've heard it exactly twice before, both times during drills. This isn't a drill. My display shows Cell 19's temporal distortion field dropping, 94.2%. The numbers fall like a stone through water. Around me, the other analysts are moving, their hands flying across their interfaces, but I can't hear what they're saying over the alarm. I'm focused entirely on my screen and the single impossible fact it's showing me. The stasis field around Sci-Fi is collapsing, 73.9%. My training takes over. I activate the emergency backup systems, routing auxiliary power to the containment grid. I trigger the secondary stabilizers. I send an automatic distress call to the facility director. None of it matters. The field strength continues to drop. 48.3%. At 40% efficiency, the stasis bubble will no longer slow time meaningfully. At 20%, it will fail entirely. At 0, there will be nothing between a 400,000-year-old god and the 140 people living in this facility. The number hits 31.8%, and I have time to think one clear thought. We're going to die down here. Then the field strength jumps back to 98.7%. The alarms cut off. The screens return to their normal display configurations. My readouts show cell 19 stable, contained, normal. The temporal distortion field is operating within acceptable parameters. The power draw has returned to baseline. I'm standing in a different part of the control room. That's the first thing I notice. I was sitting at my station. Now I'm standing near the observation window, the thick diamond composite barrier that lets us look directly into the cell block corridor. I don't remember getting up. I don't remember walking. The second thing I notice is the blood on my hands. Both palms are cut, dozens of small lacerations crossing the skin in no particular pattern. The blood is fresh, still wet. I can see it on my fingers, under my fingernails. 4 of my fingernails are missing entirely, torn off at the quick. The exposed nail beds are bleeding freely. I look around the control room. 6 other analysts are scattered across the space, all standing in positions away from their stations. All of them are bleeding from their hands. Nina is closest to me, standing motionless with her arms at her sides, staring at nothing. Her palms are cut too. Paul is near the central console, swaying slightly. Lynn is by the door. Everyone is in the wrong place. The 8th analyst, Derek, who usually monitors cell 18, is still sitting at his station. He's the only one. His hands are pressed flat against his display screen, leaving bloody palm prints on the surface. I force myself to look at what we've written. The word is everywhere. On the displays, on the walls, on the observation window, carved into the composite material of the console surfaces, smeared on our uniforms, written on skin. Hunger. I look down at my own station screen and see that someone has scratched the word into the display surface with enough force to crack the protective coating. The letters are deep and deliberate. I look at my hands, at the missing fingernails, and understand what tool was used. My heart rate is elevated. I can feel the muscle contracting in my chest, rapid and hard. I take a breath and force myself to think analytically, to process what I'm observing before I interpret it. Observation. The stasis field failed for an unknown duration and has now recovered. All 8 analysts in Control Room 3 have experienced missing time. During that missing time, we mutilated ourselves and wrote the same word repeatedly. None of us remember doing it. The control room door opens. Dr. Sarah Koenig enters first, followed by 2 medical technicians. She takes in the scene with the kind of calm that comes from years of dealing with crisis situations in closed environments. Her eyes move from person to person, cataloguing injuries. "Nobody move," she says. "Medical team is here. We're going to assess everyone systematically." She approaches Paul first, examining his hands without touching them. Then Lynn. Then Nina, who still hasn't moved or changed expression. When Dr. Koenig reaches me, she looks at my hands, then at my face, then at the word I carved into my monitor. "Do you remember writing this?" she asks. "No." "Do you remember the stasis failure?" "I remember watching the field collapse. I remember it recovering. I don't remember anything between those 2 events." She nods and moves on to check the others. One of the medical technicians approaches me with a scanner, taking readings of my vitals and neural activity. I let him work while I pull up the incident logs on my secondary display, the one that isn't damaged. The timestamp tells me what I need to know. The stasis field failed for exactly 3.6 seconds on the system clocks. That's all they captured. It's nowhere near enough time for 8 people to stand up, move around the room, and methodically carve the same word into every available surface. Yet, that's what we did. It's enough time to tear off fingernails. It's enough time to lose ourselves completely. I examine my hands more carefully. The cuts aren't random. They form letters, crude and angular, but legible. I wrote the word on my own palms. I used my fingernails to carve it everywhere else, and when those weren't sufficient, I tore them off and kept going. The question I can't answer is why I felt the need to do it so many times. Dr. Koenig finishes her preliminary assessments and gathers all of us near the center of the room. Derek has finally moved away from his station, looking dazed. His palms are cut as badly as everyone else's. Initial evaluation, Dr. Koenig says. You've all experienced a shared psychogenic episode, likely triggered by extreme electromagnetic interference from the stasis field fluctuation. The self-injury appears compulsive and ritualistic, but limited in scope. None of the wounds are life-threatening. I'm ordering full medical quarantine and psychological evaluation for all personnel present during the incident. It's a reasonable assessment, professional, exactly what protocol demands. But I'm watching her hands. They're shaking. She notices me looking and clasps them behind her back. Then she asks me a question that isn't part of standard medical protocol. Did you want to write it? I think about that. I try to remember those 3.6 seconds, but there's nothing there. Just a gap. A space where my consciousness should have been recording events, but didn't. Except there's a feeling underneath the absence. A sense memory, like the emotional residue of a dream. Purpose. That's what I felt. I felt purposeful. Yes, I tell her. I think I did. She doesn't write that down in her notes. Director Victor Sterling arrives in control room 20 minutes later. He's 58, built like a man who spent his career in military containment operations, which he did. He built facility Eidolon from concept to operational status over 15 years. I've only spoken to him directly 3 times in 6 years. Once during my initial interview, once during my annual review, and once when I accidentally triggered a false alarm in the security system. He stands in the middle of the room and examines what we've written. His expression doesn't change. He asks Dr. Koenig for her preliminary report, and she delivers it in concise medical terminology. Shared psychogenic episode, probable electromagnetic etiology, compulsive behavior, temporary dissociation. Then he asks the question that matters. Did anyone else in the facility experience symptoms? Dr. Koenig checks her tablet. No, the effect appears limited to personnel present in this control room during the stasis fluctuation. Sterling nods slowly. He's looking at the observation window, at the word hunger smeared across the diamond composite in my blood. I can see him doing calculations in his head. How long for full psychological evaluation? He asks. Standard protocol requires 72 hours minimum for this type of incident. Dr. Koenig says. 48, Sterling says. I need preliminary assessments in 48 hours. Director, with respect... 48 hours, Doctor. We need to determine if the affected personnel can return to duty or if we need to arrange evacuation and replacement staff. He turns to address all of us. You'll remain in medical observation. Full cooperation with all assessments. The incident is classified as a technical malfunction with associated medical complications. That classification is not open for debate. He's choosing his words carefully. Technical malfunction. I understand what he's doing. If we report this accurately to the Mars Colonial Authority, 8 staff members experiencing missing time and compulsive self-injury during a stasis failure, the facility will be shut down pending investigation. Eidolon will be marked as compromised. 15 years of work will be terminated. 17 imprisoned entities will be transferred or destroyed, which assumes anyone knows how to destroy them. Sterling has decided that isn't going to happen. I'll need your personal testimony, he says to me. You're the primary analyst for 19. What did you observe during the field failure? I tell him exactly what I saw. The numbers dropping, the backup systems failing to respond, the field strength collapsing to 31.8% before recovering spontaneously. The total duration of 3.6 seconds. And your conclusion? He asks. Unknown cascade failure in the quantum containment array. The automatic recovery suggests the backup stabilizers functioned correctly once they received sufficient power allocation. I'll need to review the full diagnostic logs to determine the root cause. It's a plausible technical explanation. It avoids mentioning the missing time. It avoids mentioning what we did during those 3.6 seconds. Sterling accepts it without comment. He instructs us to proceed to the medical wing for treatment and observation. As we file out of the control room, I look back at my station one more time. The word hunger is still visible on my cracked display screen, carved deep enough that no amount of cleaning will remove it. I'll be looking at that word every day when I return to duty. If I return to duty. The medical wing occupies the eastern section of the facility, a cluster of treatment rooms and observation suites designed for the mundane injuries and illnesses of isolated populations. Broken bones, viral infections, psychological strain from living 2.5 kilometers underground with no natural light and limited social contact. Nothing in the medical protocols covers what to do when 8 people experience synchronized compulsion driven by exposure to a sleeping god. Dr. Koenig treats my hands personally. She cleans the lacerations, applies tissue regeneration gel, and bandages the nail beds where I tore off my fingernails. The regeneration gel will stimulate rapid healing. I'll have new nails growing within a week. The cuts will leave minimal scarring. She works in silence for the first 10 minutes. Then, while wrapping gauze around my left palm, she speaks quietly. I've worked in closed environments for 18 years. I've treated every form of isolation syndrome, every type of psychological break that can occur when you put humans in confined spaces for extended periods. I've never seen anything like this. You told Sterling it was electromagnetic interference, I say. That's the most rational explanation available. The alternative is that 8 trained analysts simultaneously developed the same compulsion, performed the same self-injury, and wrote the same word without any environmental trigger. That's not psychology. That's something else. You think it was Suralac? She finishes wrapping my hand before answering. I think the stasis field failed for 3.6 seconds, and during that window something happened that our current medical and psychological frameworks can't explain. I think calling it electromagnetic interference lets us continue operating while we gather more data. And I think Director Sterling is correct that reporting this as an entity exposure event would result in facility shutdown, which helps nobody. She's rationalizing. I can hear it in her voice. She's building a framework that lets her sleep at night, that lets her continue working here. That lets her avoid the obvious conclusion. For 3.6 seconds, Suralac was awake. For 3.6 seconds, 8 people stopped being themselves. I've been monitoring Cell 19 for 6 years, I say. If there was any indication of consciousness, any pattern that suggested awareness, I would have documented it. The entity is dormant. All measurements confirm dormancy. I know. So, whatever caused this, it wasn't, I know, Owen. But neither of us sounds convinced. They keep us in observation for 47 hours. Individual rooms, scheduled psychological assessments, continuous vital monitoring. The evaluations are thorough. They test memory formation, decision-making capacity, impulse control and suggestibility. They scan for neural damage, chemical imbalances, and any physiological changes that might explain the compulsion. They find nothing. By the end of the second day, Dr. Koenig clears 7 of us for return to duty. The 8th, Derek, is exhibiting persistent anxiety responses and requires extended observation. The rest of us are declared fit to resume normal operations with weekly follow-up assessments. Director Sterling accepts the evaluation. He thanks us for our cooperation. He reminds us that the incident has been classified as a technical malfunction. He informs us that he's personally reviewing all containment protocols for Cell 19 to prevent future failures. Then he sends us back to work. I return to my quarters first. The living pods are small, functional spaces. A bed, a desk, a bathroom, a wall-mounted display for personal entertainment. I've lived here for 6 years. I know every surface, every corner. I came to Eidolon after my wife died in a transport accident, when I needed distance from Earth and old memories. Monitoring a sleeping god felt like the perfect job for someone who wanted to stop feeling. Now I'm not sure what I feel. I sit on my bed and examine my hands. The bandages are white and clean. Underneath them, my palms are healing. In a few days, there will be no evidence of what I did. No physical proof that I carved the word hunger into my own skin. I stand up to use the bathroom, and that's when I see it. The mirror above the sink is fogged with condensation from the climate control system. Written in the moisture, finger-traced in clear, deliberate letters, is the word hunger. I don't remember writing it. I don't remember standing at this mirror. I've been in my quarters for less than 5 minutes. I reach up slowly and wipe the word away, watching it disappear under my palm. The condensation is already fading, evaporating in the dry air. In 30 seconds, there will be no evidence it was ever there. But I saw it. I wrote it again, and I don't remember doing it. I back away from the mirror and sit down on my bed. My hands are shaking now, the way Dr. Koenig's hands were shaking when she examined us in Control Room 3. I try to think analytically, to observe before interpreting, but the conclusion is unavoidable. The 3.6 seconds didn't end when the stasis field recovered. Whatever started during that window is still happening, and I don't think I'm going to be able to stop it. I returned to Control Room 36 hours after I wrote a word I don't remember writing on my bathroom mirror. My hands are still bandaged. 4 other analysts from the incident are back on duty too. We don't talk about what happened. We take our stations and watch the numbers that are supposed to never change. Except the numbers have changed. It takes me 20 minutes to notice because I'm looking at the wrong data first. I'm checking the temporal distortion field strength, the power consumption, the quantum containment integrity, all the primary metrics that measure whether cell 19 is stable. Everything reads normal. The field strength sits at 98.7% efficiency, exactly where it recovered after the failure. The power draw is steady. The containment bubble shows no degradation. Then I glance at the internal chronometer. The display shows that 69.2 seconds have passed inside cell 19 since we sealed it 6 years ago. That's wrong. It should show 22.4 seconds. That's what it read during the incident, and with the stasis field operating at 98.7% efficiency, only fractions of a second should have accumulated in the 48 hours since then. I pull up the historical logs and trace the timeline backwards. The chronometer advanced by 47 hours of internal time, while 48 hours passed externally. That's impossible. The stasis field is designed to slow time inside the cell by a factor of 10,000 to 1. At current efficiency, hours outside should equal milliseconds inside, but the data shows something different. Time inside cell 19 is passing at nearly the same rate as time outside. The stasis field is active. The quantum bubble is stable. All the containment systems report normal function, but time isn't slowing down anymore. I cross-reference with the backup monitoring systems, the redundant hardware that runs on isolated power circuits specifically to catch errors in the primary systems. The backup data confirms what I'm seeing. Cell 19's internal chronometer is advancing at 1 second per second, give or take minor fluctuations. Cyrillac is experiencing the present. I should report this immediately. I should call Dr. Koenig, contact Director Sterling, trigger every protocol we have for containment anomalies. Instead, I sit at my station and stare at the numbers, watching the chronometer tick forward in real time. 70.1 seconds, 70.3 seconds, 70.6 seconds. 400,000 years of enforced dormancy, and now every second that passes for me passes for Cyrillac too. I'm trying to formulate a plan, trying to decide who to contact first and what to say, when I notice the secondary data log. It tracks every keystroke and system access made from my workstation, time-stamped and recorded for security audits. I pull up the last 48 hours of activity. According to the logs, I've been accessing the Cell 19 observation window interface 43 times. The average session duration is 4 hours and 17 minutes. Total time logged over 90 hours across the last 2 days. That's impossible. I've been in medical observation for 47 of those hours. I drill deeper into the timestamps. The access logs show me using my workstation credentials during hours when I was unconscious in the medical wing, sedated for psychological evaluation. They show me logged in for 6 consecutive hours while Dr. Koenig was physically examining me in her treatment room. Someone else used my access codes. That's the rational explanation. Except the biometric authentication data confirms it was me. My retinal scan, my palm print, my voice print authorization, recorded each time I accessed the observation controls. I open the security footage archive and search for recordings from my workstation position. The facility maintains continuous video surveillance of all control rooms, standard protocol for this kind of operation. I find the timestamp for my longest recorded access session. 6 hours and 42 minutes, starting 14 hours after the stasis failure incident. The footage shows me standing at my station, motionless. My face is toward the primary display screen, but my eyes aren't focused on the data. They're focused on something beyond the screen, like I'm looking through it rather than at it. For 6 hours and 42 minutes, I don't move except to breathe. I fast forward through the footage, watching myself stand there in accelerated time. Other analysts move around me. Paul walks past, glances at me, continues to his own station. Lynn approaches once, appears to say something, gets no response, and leaves. Nobody intervenes. Nobody questions why I'm standing motionless for hours. I enable the audio feed and jump to a random point in the middle of the session. My lips are moving. I increase the volume and filter out the background noise, the ventilation system, the quiet conversations of other analysts, the soft electronic tones of the monitoring equipment. Underneath all of it, barely audible, is my own voice. Hunger, 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 hunger. I'm saying it continuously, the same word over and over for hours, the same word I carved into my display screen with my fingernails, the same word I wrote in condensation on my bathroom mirror. I close the footage and sit back in my chair. My throat is tight from the physical memory of speaking for 6 hours straight. I can feel it now, the rawness in my vocal cords, the dryness in my mouth. I'd attributed it to dehydration from the medical evaluation. I was wrong. Paul is at his station 3 meters away, monitoring Cell 18. I watch him work for a moment, looking for any sign that he's experiencing the same thing. He seems normal, focused on his displays, occasionally making notes on his tablet, sipping coffee from a thermal cup. Then I notice his eyes. He's not blinking. I watch him for 60 seconds straight, counting heartbeats, and his eyes don't close once. The tear film on his corneas should be drying out. He should be experiencing discomfort. But his gaze stays fixed on his screens, unmoving and constant. I look around the control room. Nina is at her station. Lynn is at hers. 2 other analysts I don't know as well, Jordan and Wei, are monitoring cells in the adjacent block. Everyone appears to be working normally. Everyone is motionless in a way that feels wrong. I'm the only person who's moving. I stand up carefully and walk toward the observation window. It's a 3-meter thick barrier of synthesized diamond composite, transparent and harder than any natural material. Beyond it lies the cell block corridor, a long passage lined with 17 containment chambers. Each chamber houses a quantum stasis bubble, and each bubble contains a presence that defies the rules written into the universe. Cell 19 is directly ahead, 5th, on the left. The bubble appears as a perfect sphere of distorted space, like looking at an object through heat shimmer, except the distortion is stable and constant. Inside that bubble, Sciarlac exists in a state of temporal suspension that should make it impossible to perceive anything beyond the cell walls. But I'm looking at it now, and I think it's looking back. I press my hand against the observation window. The diamond composite is cold. The temperature differential between the corridor and the control room creates a thin layer of condensation on the surface, barely visible. I can feel my pulse in my fingertips where they contact the material. Rapid, elevated, pushing blood through capillaries compressed against the window. I start to write the word hunger in the condensation. I catch myself halfway through the first letter. My finger has traced the H and half of the U before my conscious mind registers what I'm doing. I pull my hand back and stare at the partial word on the window. I didn't decide to write it. I didn't think about it. My hand just started moving, drawing the letters automatically. You've been doing that for the last 20 minutes. I turn. Nina is standing behind me. She's moved from her station without me noticing, crossing the room in complete silence. Up close, I can see how much she's changed in 2 days. Her face is thinner. The skin around her eyes is dark and slack. She's lost weight in a way that shouldn't be possible over 48 hours. Doing what? I ask. Writing the word. Stopping yourself. Writing it again. You've completed it 7 times. Each time you stare at it for a few minutes, then wipe it away and start over. I look back at the observation window. The condensation where I wrote the partial word is already evaporating. There's no evidence of the 7 complete iterations Nina claims I've written. I don't remember that, I say. None of us do. She moves closer to the window, standing next to me. But we keep doing it anyway. Paul has been logged into the observation controls for 11 hours straight. His workstation shows he's been zooming in on cell 19, increasing magnification to maximum, then resetting and doing it again. Over and over. Lynn has been running stress calculations on the containment infrastructure, modeling what would happen if the quantum bubble failed. She's run the same simulation 42 times with identical parameters. Why hasn't anyone reported this? Nina turns to look at me. Her eyes are bloodshot. Because we all think we're working normally. I'm standing here talking to you, and part of my brain is telling me I'm sitting at my station analyzing field fluctuations. I can feel myself in both places simultaneously. Can you? I check my internal sense of position and realize she's right. There's a version of me that's still sitting at my workstation, watching the chronometer advance, documenting the time acceleration anomaly. I can feel my hands on that keyboard. I can see those displays. But I'm also here, standing at the observation window, looking at cell 19. We're not experiencing missing time anymore, Nina says. We're experiencing double time. We're in 2 places at once, doing 2 things simultaneously, and we only remember the version of ourselves that makes sense, the version that's still doing our jobs normally. She reaches up and completes the word I started writing. Her finger moves across the condensation with the same automatic motion I felt in my own hand. Hunger. She doesn't seem to notice she's doing it. I need to access the restricted archive, I tell her. The classified documentation on Cell 19's capture and initial containment. If this is a known behavior pattern, there might be protocols. There are no protocols for this, Nina interrupts. Sterling's already checked. I heard him talking to Dr. Koenig 6 hours ago in the corridor outside medical. He said the original containment team didn't document any consciousness-based effects. Suralak was dormant when captured. It stayed dormant through transport and installation. Whatever this is, it's new. How do you know what Sterling said 6 hours ago? You've been on duty in Control Room 3. Nina's expression doesn't change. I was also in the corridor outside medical. I've been in a lot of places over the last 2 days. I think we all have been. We just don't remember most of them. She walks back to her station, moving with the mechanical precision of someone following a predetermined path. I watch her sit down and return to her displays. Within seconds, she appears to be working normally again, focused and professional. I look at my own station across the room. I can see myself sitting there. Not a hallucination, an actual perception of my body in a position I'm not occupying. The me at the workstation is typing, entering commands, pulling up diagnostic reports on the time acceleration anomaly. I close my eyes and try to determine which version is real. Both of them are. The restricted archive is located in Sublevel 2, a section of the facility most personnel never access. It requires director-level authorization to enter, biometric authentication, and a logged reason for every visit. I don't have any of those things. I go anyway. The access occurs during a shift change, when Control Room 3 transitions from day operations to night operations, and everyone is moving through the facility in organized chaos. I leave my station, walk through 3 security checkpoints, using credentials that shouldn't grant me passage, and descend 2 levels to a corridor lined with sealed storage rooms. I don't remember making the decision to do this. I remember sitting at my workstation, documenting the time acceleration data, preparing a formal report for Director Sterling. That version of me is still there, still working, still following protocol. This version of me is breaking into the restricted archive. The door accepts my palm print. That shouldn't work. My biometric profile doesn't have clearance for this section. But the lock disengages and the door slides open, and I step into a narrow room lined with physical data storage. Crystalline matrices that hold information too sensitive for network access. Each matrix is labeled with an alphanumeric code. I find the one marked 19 capture and slot it into the reading terminal. The interface activates, projecting a holographic display of text and documentation that spans decades of observation and analysis. I start reading. The first document is dated April 14th, 2247. It's a distress call transcript from Europa Station, a mining colony built into the Moon's subsurface ocean access point. Population 3,412. The transcript is short. Europa Station to Mars. Colonial Authority, we have a situation. Everyone stopped working 6 days ago. They're in the central dome. They won't eat. They won't sleep. They're just standing there. When I ask what they're doing, they say they're feeding it. I don't know what that means. Please send help. The next document is the rescue mission report. It took 4 days to reach Europa from Mars. When the team arrived, they found the entire colony population standing in the central dome, arranged in concentric circles around an empty point in the center of the room. Everyone was alive. Everyone was conscious. Nobody had eaten or slept in 10 days. When the rescue team asked what they were looking at, all 3,412 people responded in perfect unison. We're feeding it. The rescue team couldn't see anything in the center of the dome. Thermal imaging showed no heat signatures. Electromagnetic scans detected no anomalies. Gravitational sensors registered baseline readings. But the colonists continued staring, and when the rescue team tried to physically remove them, they became violent. 214 rescue personnel died in the first extraction attempt. The mission commander made the decision to deploy a reality fracture bomb, a weapon developed during the early coalescence event that temporarily severs causality in a localized area. The theory was that if the entity the colonists were feeding required conscious observation to maintain coherence, removing causality would make observation impossible. The bomb worked. When causality returned to the central dome 30 seconds later, 2,200 colonists were dead. Their brains had experienced catastrophic cellular breakdown, as if every neuron had simultaneously ceased function. The remaining 1,200 colonists were alive but catatonic, and in the center of the dome, contained within a hastily deployed quantum stasis bubble, was something the rescue team couldn't describe in consistent terms. Some saw it as a geometric shape. Others saw it as empty space with weight. A few saw nothing at all but felt pressure behind their eyes when they tried to look. They named it Sirlak, from an old Earth language that meant the one who is fed. The entity didn't move. It didn't communicate. It simply existed in a state of pure ontological absence. A god that manifested through the act of being perceived and sustained by the conscious attention of observers. The Europa colonists had been feeding it for 10 days, voluntarily, with their worship. They'd given it their focus, their belief, their conscious observation. And in return, it had given them purpose. The final section of the capture documentation includes testimony from the surviving colonists. They were interviewed extensively before being euthanized, a decision made after it became clear they couldn't stop trying to feed Sirlac. Even in isolation chambers, even under sedation, they would wake and attempt to return to the entity. They would hurt themselves. They would hurt others. They would do anything to get back to that empty point in the dome where something invisible was waiting to be fed. One testimony stands out. A maintenance engineer named Carla Bennett, 37 years old, 17 years with the colony. She'd been one of the first to stand in the central dome. When asked why she couldn't stop feeding Sirlac, she said, "Because it's hungry. Because we can feel that hunger, and it makes us hungry too. Not for food, for meaning. We spent our whole lives wondering what we're supposed to do, what matters, why any of this exists. And then we felt it. This vast, patient hunger that needs us, and suddenly everything was simple. Feed it. That's all we have to do. Feed it our attention, our consciousness, our belief that it exists. And in return, we get to matter. We get to be essential to something greater than ourselves. You don't understand. Nobody who hasn't felt it can understand." The document ends with a note from the mission commander. Recommendation: Sirlac represents an existential threat to consciousness-based life. Permanent containment required. Under no circumstances should this entity be housed near populated areas or monitored by personnel for extended periods. Extended exposure creates irreversible psychological dependency. I read that last line 3 times. We've been monitoring Sirlac for 6 years. I've personally been assigned to Cell 19 for 6 years. 140 people live in this facility, arranged in a geometric pattern around the cell block. Their living quarters positioned in concentric circles like the Europa colonists standing in the central dome. We built a temple and called it a prison. The realization settles into my chest like ice water. Director Sterling knew this. He read these same documents when he designed Facility Eidolon. He understood what Sirlac was, how it functioned, what happened to the people who fed it. And he built a facility where 140 people would spend years living in close proximity to the entity, monitoring it constantly, thinking about it every day. He gave it exactly what it needed. I'm about to close the archive when I notice one more document, a technical analysis of Sirlac's ontological signature dated 6 months after capture. The analysis concludes that the entity exists in a state of temporal recursion, occupying multiple time states simultaneously. It experiences past, present, and future not sequentially, but concurrently. The quantum stasis bubble doesn't slow its perception of time. It limits the number of possible time states the entity can occupy at once. And when the stasis field dropped to 31.8% efficiency for 3.6 seconds, Sirlac experienced every possible time state in that window, including states where it was fully conscious, including states where it had already been feeding on us for weeks. The entity didn't wake up during the containment failure. It remembered waking up. And that memory was enough to change what had already happened. I find Nina in the auxiliary observation room adjacent to Cell 19. This room is rarely used. It's a narrow space with an unfiltered view of the cell, designed for direct visual inspection during maintenance operations. The walls are covered with calculations written in marker, the equations sprawling across every available surface in Nina's handwriting. She's sitting on the floor, her back against the observation window, writing more calculations on her tablet. She's thin in a way that's medically alarming. Her uniform hangs loose. The bones in her wrists are visible beneath skin that looks translucent. "How long since you've eaten?" I ask. She doesn't look up from her tablet. 38 hours. I'm not hungry." "Nina, you need to go to medical." "I'm fine. I'm working." I look at the calculations on the walls. They're complex equations dealing with consciousness quantification, measuring how much focused attention it would take to sustain an entity that feeds on observation. The numbers are precise. The methodology is sound. Nina has calculated exactly how many people, thinking with what intensity, for how many hours per day, would be required to maintain Cyrillac in a semi-dormant state. The answer, written in large numbers on the wall directly above her head. 140 people, 8-hour shifts, 6 years minimum for initial conditioning. You're describing this facility, I say. I'm describing what Sterling built. I'm describing what we've been doing since the day Eidolon opened. She sets down her tablet and looks up at me. We're not monitoring Cell 19. We're feeding what's inside it. Every time we check the displays, every time we think about the entity, every time we worry about containment, we're giving it exactly what it needs. Small amounts of consciousness, distributed across a large population, sustained indefinitely. Then why did it wake up? If the system was working, if we were feeding it enough, because it wants more. Nina stands up, moving with the shaky precision of someone who hasn't slept in days. The 3.6-second breach wasn't a malfunction. It was Cyrillac testing its strength, proving it could override our free will, making us write the same word, mutilate ourselves, lose time. All of it was a demonstration. It wanted us to know what it can do when we give it our full attention instead of these small, ambient amounts. She presses her palm against the observation window, the same gesture I made hours ago. Her hand leaves a print in the thin layer of moisture that condenses on the cold surface. I can feel it now, she says, in my thoughts, sorting through my memories like files in a database. Learning about this facility, about the people here, about how we think and what we care about. It's learning how to feed more efficiently, how to make us want to give it our consciousness voluntarily instead of taking it by force. We need to report this to Sterling. Nina laughs. It's a dry sound like paper tearing. Sterling already knows. He's been visiting Cell 19 every night for the last 3 months, standing at this exact window, feeding it directly. Why do you think he classified the incident as a technical malfunction? He can't afford to have Eidolon shut down. This facility is his life's work, his purpose, and Cyrillac knows that. She turns to face me fully, and I can see the dark circles under her eyes, the hollow quality to her gaze. It's too late for me, she says. I've been feeding it consciously for 2 days. I can't stop. I don't want to stop. It feels good, Owen. It feels like I finally understand what I'm supposed to be doing. But you're still fighting it. I can tell. You're still trying to think clearly. So I'm going to tell you something you need to know. She picks up her tablet and opens a file directory I recognize. My personal logs from the facility network. Every analyst maintains a daily log for documentation purposes. Mine should contain 6 years of routine entries about monitoring Cell 19. Nina hands me the tablet. Check your logs from before the breach, 3 weeks before, 1 month before. Go back further. I scroll through the entries, reading my own words from months ago. The early entries are normal, technical observations, minor anomalies in the stasis field, routine maintenance notes. But as I move backwards through time, I start seeing entries that I don't remember writing. An entry from 8 weeks ago. Dreamed about Cell 19 again. 3rd night in a row. In the dream, the stasis bubble is empty. I'm standing in the observation room, looking at nothing, and I understand that nothing is looking back. An entry from 12 weeks ago. Can't focus today. Keep thinking about Cyrillac. Not worried about containment, just thinking about it. Wondering what it experiences inside the temporal distortion. Wondering if it knows we're here. An entry from 19 weeks ago. Why do I keep coming back to the observation window after my shift ends? I tell myself I'm being thorough, double-checking the systems, but I think I just want to look at it. I scroll back further. 6 months, 9 months, a year. The entries become more frequent, more obsessive. I was thinking about Cell 19 constantly, dreaming about it, writing about it in my personal logs. And I don't remember any of it. You've been feeding it longer than anyone, Nina says quietly. Sterling chose you for Cell 19 because you were grieving. Because you came here wanting to feel nothing. And that made you vulnerable. Siralak started cultivating you on your first day. Slowly, carefully, training you to think about it more and more. And now, she doesn't finish the sentence. She doesn't need to. I'm the primary feeder. I'm the one Siralak has invested the most time conditioning. I'm the one it wants most. What do? I ask. Nina takes the tablet back from my hands. She sets it down carefully on the floor, then steps closer to me. Her breath smells sweet and chemical, like her body is breaking down its own tissues for energy. You can't stop it, she says. None of us can. The contamination is too deep. We're going to keep feeding it whether we want to or not. The only question is whether we do it consciously with understanding or whether we keep pretending this is something we can fight. There has to be a way to... There isn't. I've run the calculations. I've modeled every scenario. The only way to stop feeding Siralak is to eliminate consciousness entirely, kill everyone in the facility, shut down every mind that's been exposed. That's the only solution, and nobody is going to authorize it. She walks back to her position against the observation window and slides down to sitting. She picks up her tablet and returns to her calculations, already losing interest in me. Go back to your station, she tells me. Document the time acceleration. Write your reports. Pretend you're still doing your job. It doesn't matter anymore. We're all feeding it now. We've been feeding it all along. We just finally know what we're doing. I leave Nina in the auxiliary observation room and return to Control Room 3. The shift has changed. Paul is gone. Lynn is gone. New analysts have taken their positions. Nobody comments on my absence. Nobody asks where I've been. I sit down at my workstation and look at the chronometer for Cell 19. 407 seconds have passed inside the cell since we sealed it 6 years ago. Siralak is awake, and I've been feeding it since the day I arrived. Director Sterling's office is locked when I arrive. The biometric scanner next to the door reads my palm print and flashes red. Access denied. I stand in the corridor for 30 seconds, trying to decide if breaking into the director's office is the line I won't cross. And then I realize I've already crossed every other line that mattered. I override the lock using an emergency maintenance code that shouldn't work for this type of door. It works anyway. The contamination has spread through the facility's security systems, or through me, or through the distinction between those two things, which no longer feels meaningful. The office is small and austere. A desk, 2 chairs, a wall-mounted display showing real-time status feeds from all 17 containment cells. No personal items, no photographs or decorations. Sterling has lived in this facility for 15 years, and he's left no evidence of human habitation beyond the furniture that came standard with the room. I access his personal files using credentials I shouldn't possess. The system accepts my authentication without protest. I'm not sure if that's because Siralak wants me to see what's in these files, or because I've been authorized all along and never realized it. The distinction might not matter. The first file I open is labeled Eidolon Original Design. The blueprints that appear on the display are familiar. I've seen the facility schematics during orientation and safety training. The cell block at the center, the control rooms arranged around the perimeter, the living quarters, storage areas, medical wing, and maintenance tunnels branching out in organized patterns. But Sterling's version includes annotations that don't appear in the official documentation. Someone has drawn lines connecting the living quarters to Cell 19. Geometric lines, precise and measured, radiating outward from the cell like spokes on a wheel. Each line terminates at a residential pod. The angles are exact, the distances are calculated down to the centimeter. I zoom in on the annotations. Next to each residential pod is a handwritten note in Sterling script. Pod 14A, 47.3 meters, 62-degree angle. Optimal for sustained low-level observation. Estimated contribution, 2.7%. Pod 14B, 51.8 meters, 58-degree angle. Suboptimal distance. Estimated contribution, 1.9%. Pod 14C, 44.1 meters, 66-degree angle. Optimal for sustained low-level observation. Estimated contribution, 3.1%. The notes continue for every residential pod in the facility. 140 living spaces, each one positioned at a specific distance and angle from cell 19. Each one assigned a percentage value. I add up the percentages. They total 100%. Sterling didn't just build a prison. He built a focusing array. Every person in this facility lives in a position calculated to direct their ambient consciousness toward cell 19. When we sleep, when we eat, when we sit in our quarters thinking about nothing in particular, we're all pointed at Cyrillac. Our passive attention flows towards the cell by architectural design. We're not guards, we're components. I open the next file, Power Consumption Analysis. The document contains 6 years of data tracking the facility's energy usage correlated against staff psychological evaluations. Sterling has been measuring something specific: the relationship between how much power the quantum stasis field requires and how much time personnel spend thinking about cell 19. The correlation is perfect. When staff members develop insomnia, the power draw from the stasis field drops by 0.03%. When someone starts obsessively checking their monitoring station, the draw drops by 0.07%. When personnel begin experiencing intrusive thoughts about Cyrillac, dreams, daydreams, random moments of wondering what exists inside the cell, the power consumption decreases proportionally. Sterling has documented every instance over 6 years. He's built a mathematical model that predicts exactly how much conscious attention Cyrillac needs to remain stable at reduced power consumption. The model's accuracy is 97.4%. The most recent entry is dated 4 days ago, the morning after the containment breach. Sterling's notes are brief. Model failure. Entity consumption exceeded predicted values by 340% during 3.6-second exposure. Staff consciousness no longer sufficient for passive containment. Entity demanding active feeding. Recommend immediate facility evacuation and entity termination. Below that, in different handwriting, shakier, less controlled, is a second note. Can't evacuate, can't terminate, can only feed it, can only give it what it wants. This is what it was always going to become. This is what I built it to become. I understand now. I'm reading that second note for the 3rd time when Director Sterling walks into his office. He doesn't seem surprised to find me at his desk, accessing his classified files. He closes the door behind him with careful precision and stands with his back against it. He's wearing the same uniform he always wears, crisp and regulation, but something in his posture has changed. He's holding himself too still, like movement requires conscious effort. You found the blueprints, he says. You built a temple. I built a containment facility with a sustainable power budget. His voice is calm, rational. The Mars Colonial Authority allocated funding for 17 cells with standard quantum stasis systems. Those systems require 8.2 megawatts per cell for complete temporal suspension. We couldn't generate that much power this far from the main colony grid. I needed an alternative approach. So you decided to use people as a power source. I decided to exploit Cyrillac's ontological nature. It feeds on conscious observation. If we provided a maintenance level of attention, ambient consciousness distributed across a large staff population, the entity would remain semi-dormant and the stasis field would require less energy. It was supposed to be symbiotic. We give it enough consciousness to keep it satisfied. It stays asleep. Everyone benefits. Sterling moves away from the door and sits in the chair across from his desk. The motion looks rehearsed, like he's playing a role he's forgotten the lines for. I ran the calculations, he continues. Small amounts of passive attention spread across 140 people, cycling through shifts so no single individual experienced extended exposure. The Europa colonists stood in one place for days, giving Cyrillac their complete focus. I thought we could avoid that by keeping the feeding diffuse and unconscious. I was trying to prevent what happened on Europa. You read the capture documentation. You knew the risks. I knew the risks of concentrated exposure. I thought distributed exposure would be safe. He looks at his hands, which are resting flat on his thighs. I was wrong. Cyrillac is smarter than I anticipated. It doesn't just feed on consciousness. It cultivates it. It trains its food sources to provide more and more attention over time. The Europa colonists went from normal function to complete obsession in 10 days because they were feeding it directly. We took 6 years because we were feeding it gradually. But the endpoint is the same. I pull up the power consumption data on the display and turn it so Sterling can see. The breach changed everything. Cyrillac tasted what full consciousness feels like. Now it's pulling harder. It's not pulling, we're pushing. Sterling's hands close into fists, then open again. The 3.6-second breach wasn't a malfunction. It was a demonstration. Cyrillac proving it could override our free will entirely, making us write the same word, mutilate ourselves, lose time. All of it designed to show us what we become when we give it our complete attention instead of these small, ambient amounts. Then we shut down the feeding, evacuate the facility, seal cell 19 permanently, and never, we can't. Sterling stands up abruptly. I've been consciously feeding it for 3 days. I can feel it in my thoughts, Owen, in my decisions, in every word I'm saying right now. I don't know if I'm talking to you because I want to, or because Cyrillac wants me to. I don't know if there's a difference anymore. He walks to the wall display and changes the feed to show Cell 19's observation window. The diamond composite barrier, the quantum stasis bubble beyond it, the empty space that isn't empty. I visit the cell every night, he says. I stand at the window for hours, and it feels good. It feels like meaning, like the first time in my life that I've been truly useful. 15 years I spent building this facility, and I told myself it was about protecting humanity, about containing threats. But the truth is simpler. I built Cyrillac a temple because part of me always wanted to worship something. I stand up from his desk and move toward the door. We need to trigger the evacuation protocols. Get everyone out of the facility before what? Before the contamination spreads. It's already spread, Owen. 60% of the staff are feeding Cyrillac consciously now. The other 40% are feeding it unconsciously, and anyone we evacuate will take the contamination with them. We'd be delivering Cyrillac straight to Mars colony. 2.4 million people arranged in cities that are already geometrically optimal for entity feeding. Then Earth. Then everywhere humans exist. He turns away from the display to face me directly. There's only one question left, he says. Do we feed it consciously, with understanding of what we're doing? Or do we keep pretending this is something we can fight? There has to be another option. Then find it, because I can't. I'm going back to cell 19 now. I'm going to stand at the observation window and feed Cyrillac until my body shuts down from exhaustion. And I'm going to feel grateful the entire time. That's what I've become. That's what we've all become. Sterling walks past me and opens the door. He pauses in the threshold without looking back. I'm sorry, he says. I thought I was saving us. I thought I was so clever, turning a liability into an asset, using the entity's own nature against it. But I wasn't saving anything. I was just building a better cage. And the thing about cages is that they work both ways. He leaves. I stay in his office, staring at the blueprints on the display screen, looking at the geometric perfection of his design. 140 people arranged in concentric circles around a hungry god. A feeding array disguised as a containment facility. My reflection appears on the dark surface of the display screen. I'm alone in the office. I should leave. I should go to Dr. Koenig, report what I've learned, try to organize some kind of response. Instead, I find myself thinking about Cell 19, wondering what Surlac experiences right now, after 400,000 years of enforced dormancy. Wondering if it's grateful to be awake, or if waking was always part of its plan. I realize I've been standing motionless for 40 minutes. The lower maintenance levels are the only section of the facility not geometrically aligned with Cell 19. They're utility spaces carved into bedrock below the main installation. Fusion reactor housings, water processing systems, emergency life support backups. The corridors are narrow and cold. The walls are bare rock. Nobody lives down here. Nobody spends more time here than necessary. It's the only place I can think clearly. I'm sitting on a catwalk above the fusion reactor, reviewing my options. I've been thinking for 2 hours, and every scenario ends in loss. Option 1. Destroy the stasis field. I can trigger the facility self-destruct, which will kill everyone inside and potentially destroy Surlac before it stabilizes. But the self-destruct was designed to prevent entity escape, not to eliminate post-reality beings. There's no guarantee the explosion will affect something that exists outside conventional space-time. I'd be killing 140 people on the hope that fire and pressure can destroy a god. Option 2. Evacuate the facility. Load everyone onto transport shuttles and return to Mars colony. But Sterling's right. The contamination is too deep. We'd be spreading Surlac's influence to a population center where millions of people could become feeders. The entity would grow exponentially, and then the contamination would spread to Earth. I'd be saving 140 people by condemning billions. Option 3. Call for help. Send a distress signal to Mars Colonial Authority. Request immediate extraction and containment support. But any rescue team that arrives will become infected within hours of exposure. I'd be luring more feeders directly to Surlac. I'd be giving it exactly what it wants. Every option requires sacrificing something. The question is what I'm willing to lose. I'm still thinking when I hear footsteps on the catwalk behind me. I turn expecting Sterling, or Nina, or one of the other compromised analysts. Instead, I find Dr. Sarah Koenig carrying a medical kit and moving with the careful precision of someone who hasn't slept in days. She sits down next to me on the catwalk without asking permission. For a long moment, we both stare at the fusion reactor below. A massive cylinder of magnetic containment fields holding a miniature sun that powers this entire facility. I've been reviewing the medical data, she says finally. Blood work, brain scans, metabolic panels for everyone exposed during the breach. Trying to find a physiological explanation for what's happening. Some chemical change, some neural pattern I could treat with medication or therapy. Did you find anything? I found that 63 people haven't eaten in over 48 hours. 27 have stopped sleeping entirely. 15 have developed cardiac arrhythmias consistent with extreme prolonged stress. And every single person I've scanned shows the same alteration in their prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for executive function and decision-making. It's not damage, it's optimization. Their brains are becoming more efficient at focusing attention. She opens her medical kit and pulls out a small device I recognize as a neural scanner. She presses it against her own temple and activates it. The readout appears on the device's screen. Abnormal activity in the prefrontal cortex, consistent with sustained hyperfocus. I've been feeding it since the moment I examined you in Control Room 3, she says. I could feel it even then, this pull to keep thinking about Cell 19. To keep wondering what happened during those 3.6 seconds. Every patient I treat, every test I run, every conversation I have about the incident. I'm feeding Surlac. I'm giving it my consciousness, and the worst part is that I can't make myself care. Sterling said there's no way to stop it. Sterling's wrong. She puts the scanner back in her kit and pulls out a different device. A medical injector preloaded with something I don't recognize. There's one way. It's terrible, but it works. We eliminate consciousness entirely. I stare at the injector. You want to kill everyone. I want to sedate everyone. Medically induced comas for 96 hours, long enough to starve Cyrillac of conscious attention. Without feeding, the entity will weaken. The stasis field will regain effectiveness. The contamination will break down in our neural tissue. When we wake up, we'll be clean. Someone has to maintain the life support systems. Someone has to stay conscious. Yes. The word hangs between us. I understand what she's offering. She wants to put everyone else under and remain awake herself, alone in a facility with a hungry god, maintaining the systems that keep 140 people alive while resisting the urge to feed the thing that's been cultivating her consciousness for days. You can't do this alone, I say. The moment you're the only conscious person in the facility, Cyrillac will focus its entire pull on you. You'll last hours before you break. I'll last long enough. I'm a psychologist. I know every cognitive trick for resisting compulsion, meditation, grounding techniques, scheduled activity routines. I can hold out for 96 hours. And if you can't, if you start feeding it consciously, she pulls out a second injector. This one I recognize. A termination compound. The kind of chemical that stops brain function instantly, used for medical euthanasia in cases where life support is unsustainable. If I fail, she says, you use this on me first. That's the immediate failsafe. If containment still degrades, you trigger the facility self-destruct. That's the failsafe. You make me promise that if I start feeding Cyrillac instead of keeping everyone sedated, you'll kill us all, including yourself, including me. I take the second injector from her hand and examine it. The compound inside is clear and viscous. A single dose, enough to stop a heart in under 30 seconds. I turn the injector over, watching the liquid catch the light. Why me for the failsafe? I ask. You're staying conscious and sedating me with everyone else. Why am I the trigger? Because you're still fighting it. I can see it in how you move, how you talk. You're thinking analytically, processing options. You haven't given in yet. That makes you more dangerous to Cyrillac than I am. She opens her medical kit wider, revealing dozens of preloaded sedative injectors. And because I won't let you volunteer for the thing I'm about to do. Someone has to come out of this remembering that they didn't give up. Someone has to survive with a clear conscience. She's rationalizing. I can hear it in her voice. She's building a framework that lets her be the hero, that lets her sacrifice herself cleanly. But underneath the rationalization is something else. The same pull I feel when I think about Cell 19. The same hunger that made the Europa colonists stand in concentric circles for 10 days. She wants to be alone with Cyrillac. She wants to feed it without anyone watching. I should refuse. I should tell her this plan is suicide. I should physically stop her from implementing a protocol that will put 139 people into medically induced comas, while the most contaminated person in the facility stays conscious to guard them. Instead, I watch her stand up from the catwalk and organize her injectors. I'll start with the control room staff, she says. They're the most compromised. Then the residential pods working outward from Cell 19. I'll leave you for last. When everyone else is under, I'll inject you, and then I'll maintain systems until the 96 hours are complete. And if something goes wrong, nothing will go wrong. I've run the protocols, I know the dosages, I've calculated the life support requirements for sustained sedation. This will work, Owen. This is the only thing that will work. She picks up her medical kit and starts walking back along the catwalk toward the main facility levels. I follow her because I can't think of a reason not to. We pass through 3 security checkpoints, each one accepting our credentials without question. The facility wants us to succeed. Cyrillac wants us to succeed. Or maybe the distinction between those two things has stopped being meaningful. We reach the medical wing. Dr. Koenig begins loading a transport cart with sedative injectors, enough to dose every person in the facility. She moves with efficient purpose, checking each dose twice, organizing them by residential section. I'll need 4 hours to complete the initial sedation, she says. Another hour to verify everyone is stable. Then I'll inject you and begin the maintenance period. When you wake up, I'll have a full report ready. Medical data, system logs, everything you'll need to report this incident to Mars Colonial Authority. She's already planning the documentation, already thinking about the official narrative. The story we'll tell when this is over, if we survive, if her plan works, if Cyrilak lets us walk away from this. I want to believe we'll get that chance. Your hands are shaking, I say. She looks down at her hands, which are trembling badly enough to make the injectors rattle against each other. She sets down the one she's holding and presses both palms flat against the cart's surface. I've been thinking about Cell 19 constantly for 72 hours, she says quietly. Even when I'm treating patients, even when I'm running tests, every spare moment of consciousness is directed at that cell. I dream about it when I sleep. I hallucinate about it when I'm awake. I can feel Cyrilak in my thoughts now, Owen, examining me, learning me, figuring out exactly how to make me want to feed it voluntarily. Then you can't be the one to stay conscious. I'm the only one who can. Because I understand what it's doing. Because I can recognize the manipulation even while it's happening. Knowledge is the only defense we have left. She picks up the injector again, her hands still shaking, and loads it into the cart with the others. When the cart is full, 48 doses total, she starts pushing it toward the door. Wait in your quarters, she tells me. I'll come for you when everyone else is sedated. Don't go near Cell 19. Don't think about it if you can avoid it. Just wait. She leaves before I can argue. I stand alone in the medical wing, surrounded by equipment designed to keep humans alive in hostile environments. Oxygen generators, blood synthesizers, surgical autoclaves. All the tools we need to survive in a place that wants to kill us. But none of it was designed to protect us from something that doesn't want us dead. It wants us alive and conscious and feeding it forever. I don't go to my quarters. I go to the auxiliary observation room where I last saw Nina. The calculations are still on the walls. Equations quantifying consciousness, measuring attention, predicting how many people thinking with what intensity for how many hours would be required to wake something that feeds on being observed. Nina is still sitting against the observation window. She hasn't moved. Her tablet has fallen from her hands and lies face down on the floor. She's so thin now that her skeleton is visible beneath skin that looks like wet paper. She's also still breathing. I kneel beside her and check her pulse. It's there. Weak and rapid, but present. Her eyes are open, staring at Cell 19 through the diamond composite barrier. Her lips are moving, forming the same word over and over with no sound. Hunger. I look through the observation window at what she's seeing. Cell 19's quantum stasis bubble is still intact, still functioning at 98.7% efficiency. But something has changed inside it. The empty space doesn't look empty anymore. I count 13 shapes. 13 new forms inside the cell where only Cyrilak should exist. I pull up the quantum monitoring data on my portable interface. The readout confirms what I'm seeing. 13 distinct ontological signatures within Cell 19, each one stable and independent, each one calibrated to human consciousness, each one hungry. Cyrilak didn't just wake up, it reproduced. The realization hits me. I sit down hard on the floor, my back against the wall, staring at the data that confirms what should be impossible. The entity that feeds on consciousness has spent 3 days consuming the focused attention of 140 people, and it used that energy to create offspring. Each new entity is a template built from a human feeder. Nina, Paul, Lynn, Sterling, and 9 others I haven't identified yet. 13 people have given Cyrilak their complete consciousness. 13 new gods have been born from that sacrifice. And Nina is still alive. Her body is still breathing, her heart is still beating, but there's nothing behind her eyes except the compulsion to feed. She's become a permanent component, a living battery, a consciousness reduced to a single function. Observe the cell, think about what's inside it, provide endless attention to sustain the entities that were born from her sacrifice. I hear footsteps in the corridor outside. Dr. Koenig appears in the doorway, pushing her cart of sedative injectors. She takes in the scene. Nina on the floor, me against the wall, the shapes visible inside cell 19. "How long has she been like this?" she asks. "I don't know. Hours at least, maybe days." Dr. Koenig approaches Nina carefully and runs a medical scanner over her vital signs. The readout makes her jaw tighten. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, cardiac stress. She should be dead, but her brain activity is elevated, higher than baseline, higher than should be physically possible. She's burning through consciousness faster than her body can sustain it. She's feeding 13 entities now instead of 1. Then she won't last another day. Dr. Koenig loads a sedative injector and presses it against Nina's neck. The injection triggers automatically. Nina doesn't react. Her eyes stay open, still staring at the cell. Her lips keep moving. "The sedative should work within 90 seconds, Dr. Koenig says. "Her consciousness will shut down. She'll stop feeding them." We wait. 90 seconds pass. Nina's eyes remain open. Her pulse remains elevated. The sedative has no effect. Dr. Koenig injects her again with a double dose, then a triple dose. She uses 4 injectors total, enough sedative to put a person in a coma for a week. Nina doesn't change. She keeps staring. She keeps feeding. Advanced feeders can override pharmacology. The entity keeps her prefrontal networks locked into hyperfocus despite the dose. "It's not working," I say. "It's not working because she doesn't want to stop. The compulsion is overriding the sedative. Her consciousness is choosing to stay active." Dr. Koenig puts down the empty injectors and stands up. "This is what Sterling was afraid of. This is why he wanted to evacuate. Once someone reaches this stage, they can't be saved. They've given themselves completely to Serlac. Their consciousness belongs to it now." I look at the other 12 shapes inside cell 19. 12 more people somewhere in this facility, sitting in front of observation windows, burning through their consciousness to sustain the things they've birthed. 12 more Nina Torres, starving to death while they feed gods they can't stop worshipping. "How many people have you sedated so far?" I ask. 73. "I've been working for 3 hours. Another hour and I'll have everyone down except you and me." She looks at Nina's unresponsive body. "And the 13 who are past saving. We can't leave them like this. We don't have a choice. If we try to physically remove them from the observation windows, they'll become violent. If we succeed in moving them, Serlac will just find 13 new feeders to replace them. The only solution is to sedate everyone else and hope that 96 hours without fresh feeding will weaken the entities enough that these 13 can be separated without triggering replacement behavior. It's pragmatic, ruthless, exactly what the situation requires. You're not going to stay conscious for 96 hours, I tell her. You're going to stand at an observation window and join them. You're going to become the 14th feeder. That's why you volunteered for this. That's why you insisted on being the one to stay awake. Dr. Koenig doesn't deny it. She picks up her medical cart and turns toward the door. Probably, she says, but I'm going to try not to. I'm going to use every technique I know to resist. And if I fail, if I end up pressed against that window like Nina, you'll wake up in 96 hours and trigger the self-destruct. You'll kill me and everyone else in this facility. That's the deal. That's the only way this works. She pushes the cart into the corridor and disappears. I hear her footsteps receding, hear the cartwheels squeaking on the composite floor. She's going to finish sedating the remaining staff. She's going to inject me last. She's going to be alone with Serlac and 13 hungry offspring, and I'm going to let her do it. I stand up from the floor and take one last look at Nina. She's still staring at cell 19, still feeding. Her body is consuming itself to sustain consciousness, burning muscle and organ tissue for energy, converting everything she is into fuel for observation. She looks peaceful. I walk back to my quarters because there's nowhere else to go. The corridors are empty. The facility is silent, except for the ever-present subsonic vibration of the quantum processors. I pass residential pods where 73 people are lying in medically induced comas. their consciousness shut down, their attention withdrawn from Cyrillac for the first time in days or weeks or months. I wonder if it hurts them to stop feeding. I wonder if they'll thank us when they wake up. My quarters are exactly as I left them. Bed unmade, desk cluttered with datapads, bathroom mirror clear of condensation. I sit on my bed and wait for Dr. Koenig to arrive with the sedative that will shut down my consciousness for 96 hours. I try not to think about Cell 19. I try not to wonder what Cyrillac is experiencing right now, surrounded by 13 offspring, sustained by 13 dying humans, waiting for the last conscious mind in the facility to give in and join them. I fail. I think about it constantly. 20 minutes later, Dr. Koenig appears in my doorway. She's not pushing the medical cart anymore. She's holding a single injector and moving like someone walking against a strong current. Her hands are shaking worse than before. Her eyes are unfocused. "Everyone else is sedated," she says. 126 people in stable comas, 13 feeders at observation windows. You're the last one. She steps into my quarters and closes the door behind her. The injector is trembling in her grip. "Before I do this," she says, "I need you to understand something. I want to go to Cell 19. I want to stand at that window and feed Cyrillac until my body gives out. Every moment I'm not doing that feels like suffocation, like I'm holding my breath and drowning slowly. The only thing keeping me from walking there right now is the knowledge that if I do, you'll trigger the self-destruct and kill me along with everyone else. Then give me the injector. Sedate yourself first." I can't. Someone needs to maintain the life support systems. Someone needs to monitor the sedated staff and make sure they stay stable. If I put myself under, 126 people die in the next 12 hours from complications I could have prevented. She crosses the room and stands in front of me. The injector is loaded and ready. All she has to do is press it against my neck and trigger the injection. "Promise me," she says. "If I fail, if I become like Nina, you'll trigger the self-destruct. You'll kill everyone in this facility, including yourself, including me. Promise me you won't let Cyrillac win." I look at her hands, which are shaking badly enough that the injector is almost vibrating. I look at her eyes, which are focused somewhere past my shoulder. I look at her expression, which is the same expression Nina wore in the auxiliary observation room, peaceful and purposeful and already gone. "I promise," I lie. She believes me. She presses the injector against my neck. I feel the pressure of the nozzle against my skin, feel the cool dispersion of chemicals entering my bloodstream. The effect is immediate. My vision starts to narrow, my muscles start to relax, my consciousness begins the slow collapse into medically induced dormancy. The last thing I see before everything goes dark is Dr. Koenig turning away from me and walking toward the door. She's moving with purpose now, with direction. She's going to Cell 19. She's going to stand at the observation window and feed the thing she spent 3 days trying to resist. And I'm not going to be conscious to stop her. The darkness takes me completely. Somewhere in that darkness, I dream about Cell 19. About quantum stasis bubbles and hungry gods and geometric shapes that fold in impossible directions. About Dr. Koenig standing at an observation window, her consciousness burning away to sustain entities that were born from human sacrifice. About the fact that she knew this would happen. About the fact that she volunteered anyway. About the fact that feeding Cyrillac feels like purpose. In the dream, I'm standing at the observation window too. I'm pressed against the diamond composite barrier, staring at something I can't quite see, and my lips are moving without sound. Hunger. The dream doesn't feel like a dream. It feels like a memory of something that hasn't happened yet. It feels like the truth. I wake up in my quarters 73 hours after Dr. Koenig injected me. The first thing I notice is the silence. The facility always has ambient sound, ventilation systems, quantum processors, the distant voices of staff moving through corridors. Now there's nothing except my own breathing and the faint subsonic vibration That means the fusion reactor is still running. The second thing I notice is that I'm alone. I sit up slowly, testing my body's response to movement. The sedative has worn off cleanly. No grogginess, no disorientation. Dr. Koenig calculated the dosage precisely. I should have been unconscious for 96 hours. Something woke me early. My quarters are dark except for the emergency lighting strips along the baseboards. The main power grid is still functional, but someone has disabled the overhead illumination. I activate my personal interface and check the facility status. Life support, operational. Fusion reactor, nominal output. Quantum containment, all cells stable except 19, which is reading at 98.7% efficiency. Population monitoring, 127 individuals in medically induced comas, vital signs stable, 13 individuals conscious. The data doesn't specify where those 13 people are located. It just confirms they're awake, their brain activity elevated above baseline, their consciousness burning at rates that should be physiologically impossible. I know where they are. I dress quickly and leave my quarters. The corridors are empty and cold. I pass residential pods where sedated staff lie in their beds, maintained by automated medical systems, their consciousness shut down exactly as Dr. Koenig planned. She succeeded in that part. She sedated everyone who could be saved. The ones who couldn't be saved are somewhere else. I take the long route to the cell block, moving through maintenance passages and service corridors, avoiding the main pathways. I'm delaying. I know what I'm going to find when I reach cell 19, and I'm not ready to see it confirmed. But delay doesn't change anything. I reach the auxiliary observation room where I last saw Nina. The calculations are still on the walls. The equations are still accurate. Nina is no longer sitting against the observation window. She's standing. 12 other people are standing with her, arranged in a semicircle around the diamond composite barrier. All 13 of them are pressed against the window, their palms flat on the surface, their faces turned towards cell 19. They're not moving or speaking. They're just staring. Dr. Sarah Koenig is fourth from the left. I approach slowly, moving along the wall to stay out of their peripheral vision. None of them react to my presence. Their attention is focused entirely on what's inside the cell. I force myself to look. Cell 19's quantum stasis bubble is intact. The temporal distortion field reads at 98.7% efficiency on my interface. But the space inside the bubble doesn't look like it did 3 days ago. The empty void that used to contain only Cyrillic now holds 14 distinct forms, geometric structures that spill past the limits of ordinary space, angles that fold through space in ways that make my vision distort when I try to track them. Each one pulls at my attention like gravity. I pull up the quantum monitoring data and confirm what I'm seeing. 14 independent ontological signatures inside cell 19. Each signature is stable, distinct, and calibrated to human consciousness. Each one is actively drawing power from the containment field. Cyrillic plus 13 offspring. The god that feeds on consciousness has reproduced, and the facility I'm standing in was designed to be the perfect incubator. I walk closer to the observation window, positioning myself between Nina and Dr. Koenig. Up close, I can see how much they've changed. Nina's body has consumed itself. Her skin is translucent, her skeleton visible beneath tissue that looks like it's dissolving. Dr. Koenig is in better condition, but only marginally. Her uniform hangs loose. Her hands pressed against the window are skeletal. Both of them are still breathing. Both of them are still conscious. Their eyes track the movements of the entities inside the cell with the precision of targeting systems. I scan Dr. Koenig with my medical interface. Her vital signs appear on my display. Heart rate 140 beats per minute. Blood pressure dangerously elevated. Core temperature 39.2 degrees Celsius. Brain activity 350% above baseline. She's burning through consciousness faster than her body can sustain. She's converting everything, muscle tissue, organ function, stored energy reserves, into fuel for observation. Her body is eating itself to keep her mind active. She'll be dead in 12 hours. All 13 of them will be dead in 12 hours. Unless I do something. I check the power consumption data for cell 19. The stasis field is drawing 14.3 megawatts, more than 3 times the design capacity for a single cell. The fusion reactor can sustain that load temporarily, but not indefinitely. Within 6 hours, the power draw will exceed our generation capacity, and the reactor will begin emergency shutdown procedures. If the reactor shuts down, the stasis field collapses. If the stasis field collapses, 14 post-reality entities are released simultaneously into a facility with 140 unconscious humans. I run the scenarios. Option 1. Wake the sedated staff and evacuate everyone who can still walk. Leave the 13 feeders behind and trigger facility self-destruct once everyone else is clear. This kills 13 people but contains the entities and prevents contamination spread. Except I can't wake the sedated staff. Dr. Koenig was the only person with the medical expertise to safely reverse the induced comas. Without her, attempting to wake them would result in neural damage or death for most of the 127 people currently under sedation. Option 2. Trigger self-destruct immediately. Kill everyone. The 13 feeders, the 127 sedated staff, and myself. Hope the explosion destroys the entities before they can escape or adapt. Except there's no guarantee the explosion will affect beings that exist outside conventional space-time. I'd be killing 140 people on the assumption that fire and pressure can destroy gods. Option 3. Increase the stasis field strength to compensate for the 14 entities. Push the quantum containment to maximum efficiency and hope it's enough to slow time inside the cell back to manageable rates. Except the power requirements would exceed our reactor capacity by 400%. We'd achieve 6 hours of stable containment before the system failed catastrophically. I sit down on the floor and force myself to think methodically, to observe before interpreting, to consider what the data is actually telling me instead of what I want it to tell me. The facility was designed to contain 17 entities, using ambient consciousness from 140 people as a supplemental power source. Sterling's calculations assumed 1 entity per cell, with distributed feeding across the entire staff population. The system was balanced, sustainable. But Cell 19 now contains 14 entities. The math doesn't work anymore. The feeding requirements have exceeded design capacity. The stasis field is pulling too much power. The 13 feeders are burning themselves out trying to sustain what they've created. And there are 16 other cells in this facility. I pull up the monitoring data for all 17 containment chambers. Cells 1 through 18 show normal function. Stable stasis fields, consistent power consumption, no signs of consciousness activity. But I remember what Director Sterling said in his office. The entity consumption exceeded predicted values by 340% during 3.6-second exposure. Cyrillac learned how to optimize its feeding. It learned how to train humans to provide more consciousness with less resistance. It learned how to reproduce. And if Cyrillac learned it, the other entities can learn it too. I'm staring at the data, watching the power consumption fluctuations across all 17 cells when I see the pattern. Cells 3 and 11 are showing minor variations in their temporal distortion fields. Nothing critical, just small irregularities in the quantum signature. The kind of fluctuations that could be calibration errors or equipment drift. The kind of fluctuations Cell 19 showed 6 years ago, when Cyrillac first started cultivating its feeders. The other entities are waking up. They're watching what Cyrillac accomplished. They're starting to pull on the consciousness of the analysts assigned to monitor them, training their feeders the same way Cyrillac trained me. Within a year, every cell in this facility will contain multiple entities. Within 2 years, the power requirements will exceed what we can generate. Within 3 years, the facility will fail, unless I change the equation. I stand up and walk to the observation window. I position myself directly in front of Dr. Koenig and look at her face. Her eyes don't track my movement. She's staring through me at the entities beyond the glass. "I'm sorry," I tell her. She doesn't respond. I don't think she can hear me anymore. Her consciousness belongs entirely to Cyrilak now. She's a component, a living battery, a mind reduced to a single function. I pull up the facility power management interface and access the quantum stasis controls. The system requires director-level authorization to modify field strength settings. I use Sterling's credentials, which I extracted from his personal files 3 days ago. The interface accepts my authentication. I adjust the stasis field parameters for cell 19. I lower the field strength from 98.7% to 40% efficiency, just barely enough to maintain temporal distortion. Just barely enough to slow time inside the cell without stopping consciousness entirely. The power consumption drops immediately. 14.3 megawatts falls to 6.1 megawatts. The fusion reactor stabilizes. The emergency shutdown warnings disappear from my display. Cell 19 is no longer drawing enough power to threaten facility operations, because the 13 feeders are providing the rest. At 40% efficiency, the stasis field can't slow time meaningfully. Cyrilak and its offspring will experience the present at nearly normal rates. They'll be conscious. They'll be hungry. And the 13 people pressed against the observation window will spend the rest of their lives feeding them. Their bodies will be maintained by automated medical systems, nutrients delivered intravenously, waste removed by catheter, temperature regulated by environmental controls. They'll be kept alive indefinitely, their consciousness slowly consumed to sustain the entities they birthed. They'll be technically alive, legally alive, medically alive, but they'll never think another independent thought. I redirect the power I saved from cell 19 to the other 16 containment cells. I increase their stasis field strength to 100% efficiency, compensating for the minor fluctuations I detected in cells 3 and 11. The other entities won't have the opportunity to learn what Cyrilak learned. They'll remain in complete temporal suspension, unconscious and dormant, while cell 19 becomes something else entirely. A feeding chamber, a temple disguised as a failed containment cell, a permanent sacrifice to prevent total facility collapse. The system stabilizes. All 17 cells show green status indicators. Power consumption is sustainable. The fusion reactor operates within normal parameters. I've solved the problem. I've also condemned 13 people to a fate that's worse than death. I sit down on the floor again and stare at the numbers on my interface. The math is perfect. The solution is elegant. Sterling would have been proud. I've turned a liability into an asset, used the entity's nature against them, built a sustainable containment system using the minimum necessary sacrifice. I've done exactly what he did 6 years ago when he designed this facility. And I understand now why he couldn't stop feeding Cyrilak, because making this decision, condemning 13 people to save 127, feels like purpose. It feels like meaning. It feels like the first time in my life that I've been truly useful. It feels good. That's the horror that makes me understand what Dr. Koenig meant when she said feeding Cyrilak was like clarity. The entity doesn't force us to worship it. It just shows us what we become when we have something worth sacrificing for. When we have a reason to make terrible choices and call them necessary. I look at the 13 feeders standing motionless at the observation window. Nina Torres, who drew calculations on walls. Dr. Sarah Koenig, who tried to save everyone. Paul and Lynn and 9 other analysts whose names I should remember but can't. They're all still breathing. They'll keep breathing for years, maintained by machines, their consciousness slowly consumed by the things they created. And I'm going to let it happen. Because the alternative is 140 deaths instead of 13. Because the math is perfect. Because I can't think of a better solution. Because Cyrilak has been training me for 6 years to make exactly this choice. I compose my report to Mars Colonial Authority, sitting at Director Sterling's desk. The report takes 4 hours to write. I revise it 6 times, removing anything that sounds like exposure event or entity influence or memetic contamination. The words I use instead: technical malfunction, equipment failure, tragic casualties. The final version reads like a maintenance incident report. Facility Eidolon Incident Summary. Incident type: critical stasis field malfunction. Casualties: 13 personnel. Status: contained. Cell 19 experienced catastrophic stasis field degradation due to quantum processor cascade failure. Field strength dropped to 40% efficiency before backup systems stabilized the containment. 13 personnel in proximity to the cell during the failure were exposed to extreme electromagnetic radiation and sustained irreversible neurological damage. Affected personnel remain in permanent vegetative state. Life support systems maintain basic autonomic function. Prognosis: no possibility of recovery. Medical recommendation: maintain current status in situ due to extreme sensitivity to movement or environmental change. Any attempt at transport would result in immediate cardiac failure. Director Victor Sterling expired from cardiac arrest during incident response. Cause of death: acute stress reaction to containment emergency. Facility power systems have been reconfigured to prevent similar failures. All remaining cells operating at optimal efficiency. 127 staff members recovered fully from temporary sedation administered during emergency protocols. No permanent injuries among surviving personnel. Recommendation: classify Cell 19 as permanent medical quarantine zone. Maintain affected personnel on life support indefinitely. Continue normal facility operations under interim director authority. No evacuation necessary. Containment integrity preserved. I read the report 3 times. Every statement is technically accurate. Every fact is verifiable. The only thing I've omitted is the truth about what those 13 people are doing while their bodies are maintained by life support. They're feeding gods. They're sustaining entities that were born from human consciousness and can't exist without it. They're sacrifices dressed up as casualties. I encrypt the report with director-level security and send it through the relay network to Mars Colonial Authority. The transmission will take 6 hours to reach the main colony. The response will take another 6 hours. By the time anyone questions my assessment, I'll have everything organized to support the narrative. Medical records showing neurological damage. Power system logs showing equipment failure. Security footage edited to remove anything that contradicts the official story. I'll build the lie so thoroughly that even I'll start to believe it. The relief team arrives 4 days later. 12 personnel, medical specialists, containment engineers, a Colonial Authority inspector. They find 127 staff members recovering in their quarters, confused and traumatized, but physically intact. They find 13 bodies on life support in the auxiliary observation room, brain dead but breathing. They find me in Director Sterling's office, maintaining facility operations, documenting everything with obsessive precision. The inspector interviews me for 6 hours. She asks about the stasis failure, the casualties, the decision to maintain affected personnel in situ rather than evacuate. I answer every question with technical accuracy and emotional numbness. I show her the logs, the medical data, the power consumption records. She asks why I'm the only senior analyst still functional. I tell her I was in the lower maintenance levels during the incident, outside the range of electromagnetic exposure. I tell her I've been monitoring the sedated staff and maintaining containment protocols. I tell her I'm requesting immediate transfer back to Mars Colony because I can't continue working here after losing 13 colleagues and watching Director Sterling die. She approves my transfer. The relief team takes over facility operations. They install new quantum processors. They implement additional safety protocols. They never question why 13 people need to remain on permanent life support in a room adjacent to Cell 19. They never look closely enough at those 13 faces to see that their eyes are still open. They never check brain activity readings to discover that consciousness is still burning at impossible rates. They never ask what those 13 people are actually doing. I leave facility Eidolon on the transport shuttle 6 days after the relief team arrives. The last thing I see as we ascend from the landing pad is the facility entrance. A reinforced tunnel leading 2.5 kilometers down into bedrock, to a place where 17 cells hold creatures the world was never built to contain. One of those cells has become a feeding chamber. 13 people will spend the rest of their lives sustaining the things that were born from their consciousness. And I'm the only person who knows the truth. 6 months later, I'm working mineral analysis for the Mars Colonial Survey Division. I have an office in the administrative complex overlooking Mariner Valley. I process geological samples from the northern ice fields and write reports about silicate composition and water content. The work is tedious, safe, exactly what I requested when I transferred out of containment operations. I live alone in a residential unit on the 43rd floor. I sleep poorly. I don't dream about Cell 19, but I think about it constantly during waking hours. Every time I close my eyes, every time my attention drifts during a meeting, every quiet moment when I'm alone with my thoughts. I can feel Cyrilak in those thoughts now, sorting through them, learning from them, growing stronger with every memory I can't suppress. The distance doesn't matter. The 200 kilometers between my office and facility Eidolon might as well not exist. I'm still feeding it. I've been feeding it every day for 6 months. I receive encrypted data packets from the facility twice per week. Automated monitoring reports confirming that containment remains stable. I'm the only person outside Eidolon who has access to these reports. I'm the only person who reads them carefully, checking the power consumption data, the stasis field efficiency, the vital signs of 13 people who should be dead but aren't. The reports confirm what I already know. Cell 19 operates at 40% efficiency. Power consumption is stable at 6.1 megawatts. 13 individuals on life support show sustained consciousness despite permanent vegetative state diagnosis. Everything is working exactly as I designed it. The entity is contained. The sacrifice is sustainable. The facility continues operations with 140 personnel who don't know they're living in a temple. I should feel relief. I should feel like I made the right choice. I saved 127 people. I prevented total containment failure. I did what had to be done. Instead, I feel like I gave Cyrilak exactly what it wanted. I'm reviewing mineral composition data on a Tuesday afternoon when my interface receives a priority message from facility Eidolon. The sender is listed as Dr. James Wallace, the new facility director who replaced Sterling. The subject line reads, "Urgent, technical consultation required." I open the message. Owen, we've detected anomalies in cells 3 and 11. Minor stasis fluctuations, similar to early readings from cell 19 before the catastrophic failure. Nothing critical yet, but concerning given recent events. Both cells showing irregular temporal distortion patterns. Power consumption varying by 0.04% across daily cycles. Requesting your consultation as former senior analyst with experience in stasis failure protocols. Can you review attached data and provide assessment? Need to determine if this requires immediate intervention or if we're seeing standard equipment drift. Attached files, 847 MB diagnostic logs spanning last 30 days. Regards, Dr. James Wallace, Director, Facility Eidolon. I don't open the attached files. I don't need to review the diagnostic logs. I already know what those fluctuations mean. The other entities are learning. Cells 3 and 11 contain beings that have spent 6 months observing what Cyrilak accomplished. They've watched one entity optimize its feeding, reproduce, and achieve a stable state where humans voluntarily sustain it. They've seen the proof that consciousness feeding works. Now they're starting their own cultivation. They're training their assigned analysts to think about them more frequently, to dream about them, to develop the same obsessive focus that I developed for Cell 19. In 6 months or a year or 2 years, those entities will be ready to reproduce. They'll have their own feeders. They'll birth their own offspring, and the facility will adapt again, lowering stasis fields, redirecting power, creating more feeding chambers to sustain more gods. Cell 19 was the proof of concept. The other 16 cells are the production model. Within a decade, Facility Eidolon won't be a prison at all. It will be exactly what Sterling accidentally built, and I deliberately preserved. A temple where humans worship things that feed on consciousness, where containment is just another word for cultivation, where every attempt to imprison gods just makes them stronger. I stare at Dr. Wallace's message for 10 minutes. I should respond. I should tell him what those fluctuations mean. I should warn him that the same pattern that destroyed Cell 19 is beginning in 2 more cells. I should recommend immediate evacuation before it's too late. Instead, I delete the message. I don't send a response. I don't offer consultation. I don't warn anyone about what's coming. Because warning them won't change anything. Because the entities are patient and smart and have been learning how to use us since the moment we tried to contain them. Because every person who works at Facility Eidolon is already feeding something, whether they know it or not. Because it's clear now what Cyrilak has been trying to teach me for 6 years. Gods don't need to escape when their prison becomes their temple. They don't need freedom when captivity gives them exactly what they want. They just need humans who believe containment is possible. Humans who will build facilities and assign analysts and monitor cells and fix their minds on the things locked inside. Humans who will feed them forever while calling it duty. I close my interface and return to my mineral analysis work. I process samples from the northern ice fields. I write reports about silicate composition. I do my job with professional competence while Cell 19 lingers at the edge of every thought. I think about 13 people standing at an observation window, their consciousness burning away to sustain gods they birthed. Dr. Sarah Koenig, who knew she would fail and volunteered anyway. Director Sterling, who spent 15 years building a temple and calling it a prison. Cyrilak, patient, vast, satisfied, finally awake after 400,000 years of waiting. It fills every empty space in my head, and that, I know, is exactly what it wants.